Welcome to This Week in Jacksonville Business Edition. I'm Kent Justice. In our podcast, you know that we focus on economic development of the River City and throughout our region. Today, this is really cool. We're hosting Joe Moy, CEO of Beep. We're going to talk, if you don't know what Beep is yet, you're going to find out about it in a second. But I love that you've got this Jacksonville connection. Of course, it's related to somebody in the family who was in the military. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's right, Ken. I'm a Jacksonville kid, got a large family here. My father retired out of Mayport many decades ago, so we've still got 6 siblings in the area and tons of cousins, nieces, and nephews, so a long history here in Jacksonville.
Where do you live now, and where is Beep headquartered? And we'll get into the business stuff in a second.
So Beep is headquartered in Orlando, Florida, and Lake Nona, a community just outside of Orlando. I actually reside in Atlanta, but spend most of my time here between Jacksonville and Orlando.
Yeah, what are some of the things you would tell me about Beep? I first heard about Beep because of JTA and this project that they've got for autonomous vehicles. The U2C is what Nat Ford talks about, and we've had him on our show here on the podcast and our Sunday show. But yeah, tell me a little bit about Beep.
Yeah, so our company was founded about 5.5 years ago, and we specialize in deploying purpose-built, autonomous, multi-passenger electric shuttles. That's a lot of words, but in essence, changing the way we move people in society by providing an alternative means to personal transportation, or more importantly, providing alternatives to people that don't have alternative or don't have other means of transportation, and specifically in what's characterized as first mile, last mile use cases. So arterial services in a downtown area like Jacksonville, or a campus, a medical campus, or an academic campus, or a business campus, airport. So if you think of that type of movement, that's really what we bring to bear in the form of both technology and vehicle platforms.
So you said just 5 years ago, 5.5 years?
5.5 years ago, yeah.
Where did the idea come from, and how did your background lead you to a place with Beep?
Yeah, so interesting question. Actually, one of my business partners and the managing partner in our investment group, his father was in transportation down in Gainesville. He ran the city of Gainesville's transportation group, and really over a family gathering pointed out to his son, my partner, that this area of autonomous mobility was really going to transform public transit as we know it. And so he started looking into it. We started looking into it in a group, and I think as a group, and after really evaluating kind of the societal impact that this represents, as serial entrepreneurs, we decided to invest and build the business that is Beep today.
You mentioned when we first started chatting before we did our interview today, I'm talking about transportation. You said we weren't really a transportation company, we're technology entrepreneurs. How did that lead to that intersection?
Yeah, so as you look at kind of what we've done as entrepreneurs in the technology arena, it's always getting out on the front of a wave of a key inflection point in technology, whether that was Y2K or cloud services or now autonomous transportation. We try to find a micro segment within a larger market, in this case autonomous mobility, and saw a real opportunity to solve for these shared use cases, these multi-passenger form factors, 14 to 15 passenger vehicles that are going to do things like take cars off the roadway, provide alternative means of mobility and transportation, extend accessibility. And so really after kind of evaluating the market as any investor would, found that there was a real gap in the need to kind of provide services, software, and solutions in this particular area. And so that's what we did. We founded the company, and 5.5 years running hard.
Tell me about the connection with JTA. Is that just a pure business deal? Is there some kind of partnership? And how does that look here in Jacksonville versus other places where you're doing businesses?
Yeah, so I tell you this, and it's something I'm excited about and proud of as it relates to being from Jacksonville, is we started to really evaluate the global theater in this area of autonomous mobility and the different platforms and solutions and partners and technologies. One of the things that stood out was this, the early phases of the U2C program. It was actually started before we were even a company, right. Some of the early testing that was done here in Jacksonville.
Because that goes back to like 2017,
right,
2016
exactly,
or something like that.
Exactly,
yeah.
And so I think one of the coolest things for me was seeing our city here kind of held up on the global stage as really being that beacon for innovation. And, we saw that in many events around the world, as well as what was going on here in the U.S. And so it was a great way for us to start to get involved in what the JTA was doing early in their process of testing, and then ultimately in a competitive procurement where we were fortunate to be awarded as part of the Balfour Beatty team that's leading that effort. So a lot of history there, but it was kind of interesting in that we got into the industry, and then in doing kind of our further evaluation, saw the importance of being associated with this program to really advance what we wanted to accomplish.
So we saw from JTA partnering with FSCJ downtown, so they've got a shuttle program there on campus. Right. That's using your vehicles, is that right?
That's correct. We don't actually make the vehicles, so we supply a lot of the software and services around the overall deployment. But that particular vehicle at FSCJ, the vehicles we have out there, we were awarded that as part of their test and learn program to run that pilot on the FSCJ campus and start to, give the community a chance to see what the future looks like. I mean, those are first generation platforms. It'll be a different form factor on Bay Street as we start that in a year's time. But that's just I'd say two things about that. One is, that kind of early adoption, early education process, and two is FSCJ has now become known as having the only accredited curriculum for autonomous maintenance and service. So it's kind of a neat connection for workforce development as well as obviously proving out the technology.
Yeah, on that academic front, going back to my days working on a master's degree, this theory of the diffusion of innovation, right? So how do people grasp new concepts? And there are some barriers that maybe are overcome by working first with college students, younger people who are already looking for, hey, I want the next best thing, not what's 30 years in the past.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right. It is a bit of a see it and believe it technology. People want to get out there. They may be apprehensive. They want to see how it operates. They want to know, is it safe? How am I going to be monitored once there's no attendant on board? What is this going to look like in the future? So yes, it's absolutely a bit of that, and I call it walk before you run, but it takes some adoption. I think you hit on an important point. That is getting those that are in the academic arena familiar with studying areas of this technology, advancing what we're trying to do across both technology and services, but also I think it's key to do things like engage the community at all levels. One of the things that we pioneered here in Jacksonville with the JTA was first responder training. If you think about the adoption of autonomous vehicles, you want to know that your first responders are trained, ready, familiar with, and supportive of how you're going to assimilate these vehicles into mobility and transportation in an area. So all of those things, I think, play a big role in adoption.
One of the things I figured would be great for us to discuss, I mean, there's opportunity here, but yeah, those obstacles. So what are some of the barriers that you're already encountering or anticipate, and what are some of the answers to those?
Yeah, so I'd say the biggest barrier, by far is the regulatory environment in our great country here. I mean, it's just a reality that our regulatory code, the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards, did not anticipate automation and technology. So we're having to go through a testing and education process at the federal level so that we can prove out that these vehicles are safer than a human-driven vehicle in a comparative sense. And that's going to require an effort at all levels. I mean, we've been fortunate to get Congressman Bean and Rutherford and others to support us in that effort and how we've approached DOT to upgrade the code and take into account the use of these new technologies. But there's still a hill to climb there, and I will also say that Jacksonville's been at the forefront of that whole dialogue and what we're doing to not only test and prove out the safety of these vehicles, but also influence the thinking as it relates to how we need to upgrade, the area of the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards specifically.
What about individual users? What about maybe there's some myths out there that they think, oh, it can't be safe for this reason, this reason. Are there efforts that you feel like, yeah, we're going to have to undertake to make sure that users are educated, users understand the facts, what these vehicles can and can't do?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, one of the things that we practice, and it's going to be really important as this technology advances, because what we're going to be deploying here in the next couple of years is going to be really, industrialized vehicles and platforms that are going to operate on the roadway like any other vehicle would. And so it does, it is a process of educating and getting people comfortable with how they work, what do they see? And so big thing we do is we actually have an attendant on board for an interim period of time. That's part of the plan. So you can, educate people on what's happening, why it's happening. They can get comfortable with the use of it. And we've had, with a lot of the survey work that we've done with deployments over 9 states now, just great success in getting repeat ridership and adoption and a real sense of comfort in using these vehicles. But it is a process you have to go through.
So one of the things that I was going to dive a little deeper on, I mean, we're talking about City of Jacksonville and JTA and that kind of thing. What about BEEP and working alongside national partners? Maybe on that federal regulatory level, I think that there's probably not just City of Jacksonville, but broadly speaking, a lot of people who have to come and say, hey, we need to adjust things.
Yeah, and so, I mean, that's a really important point. And I mean, we've built a consortium of public transit groups across the country, a public transit-led consortium that lobbies Washington, does a lot of the work associated with, educating the legislative branch and also working with DOT very closely to help them understand the needs they have for the use of these technologies in their deployment. So it is bringing together a large group of like-minded individuals that really see the societal impact of these types of solutions. And that's a really important component of how this is ultimately going to be more broadly deployed.
I get curious about entrepreneurs in all different segments, but I'm curious about this for what BEEP does. Where do you have innovators that come and you're looking for people with new ideas, or you've really focused, is there a silo here? Say, we just want this element of that autonomous, that driverless experience.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting question. I mean, one, I definitely surround myself with smarter people than myself. That's an important first step.
Process right there.
But it is a new area of technology, so it's not littered with decades of experience. And so you have to find, engineering teams that, are working in areas of automation and want to extend it into things like autonomous transportation. I mean, that's an important aspect of building out any team, and I think formulating your strategy. So that's, finding the right talent is important, but also the entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, you're doing something new and different here, and it's not for the faint of heart. Yeah. You've got to push the envelope. You've got to work everything as it relates to not only the technology, but the regulatory areas, the partner ecosystem, which plays an important role in this, and really understanding where the best components of putting together a total solution may come from. We've got different technology partners all over the world as an example. So it's kind of that whole ecosystem, I think, that has to be coordinated and leveraged.
Well, you brought up, we're talking about FSCJ, so are there opportunities in this region, in Northeast Florida, in Jacksonville specifically, where you say, yeah, this is an element where we can rely on a partner to develop our workforce?
Yeah, and so I'd hit on 2 things there specific to Jacksonville. One is the example of what's already going on at FSCJ that we talked about. The other is, and this was a level of visibility that I had into our city that I didn't have when I was growing up here, and that was an appreciation for some of the great work being done to transition our military veterans into the workforce. And great companies that have been working programs. I think of somebody like Miller Electric that we've gotten to work with that utilizes those programs. And if you think of not only the discipline, but also some of the mechanical talent that's coming out of that relates to the work we do, it really is a great environment, a nice, ripe environment for bringing together a solid workforce here in the local area.
And that's got to hit home for you with your father's military service there in the United States Navy. I know that as we watch that in our region, we see that so many, as you pointed out, talented and experienced veterans transition out of the military. And then for the commercial world, the civilian world, maybe just don't speak the same language. And so having opportunities for using that talent, accessing that talent seems really wise.
Yeah, absolutely. And readying them to be able to contribute early in cycle. It's not a large learning curve after they come into a company like ours. So completely agree.
Joe Moy, what did I miss? Because I'm enjoying the conversation. Maybe it's wrapping up, but what did I miss that you want to talk about?
You know, I mean, the future's on our doorstep. I will tell you that, you know, if you look at, you know, all the writings and stories about autonomous vehicles out there, there's still some maturation that we're going through. That is a reality. I think one of the things that people need to understand is that, and I use the phrase walk before you run, because if you think about what we're doing here in Jacksonville, you know, they're controlled routes, they're controlled speeds, planned routes. That's very different than pick me up in my driveway and take me anywhere I want to go. And so the technology is going to be adopted in a stepwise fashion where these use cases that are in some of these first mile, last mile scenarios that are represented in the U2C program and what we're doing in Lake Nona, Florida, and Atlanta, Georgia, and elsewhere across the country, that is really where people are going to start to see this technology having the big impact in changing the way we move people. And then ultimately it'll become more pervasively utilized in broader use cases, but that's going to take a good amount of time, and it's going to be a bit of an evolution we all go through together.
Joe, you mentioned growing up here in Jacksonville. I grew up West Coast, so San Francisco area, College, LA area. You want to talk about some bad traffic. Well, as bad as the traffic is there, you just mentioned Atlanta. What could the impact be for the vehicles that we're talking about now in that Atlanta metro area? How would that change things?
Yeah, so you know, it's interesting. We're looking at a lot of opportunities up there, you know, at the state level and at the local level in Atlanta. And if you think about, I always say, you know, we're not going to solve for, you know, our carbon emissions goals by replacing one vehicle, you know, one combustion engine vehicle with an electric vehicle. We got to change the way we move people. We got to take cars off the roadway. And so providing safe, affordable, convenient transportation that enables you to leave your car at home and ultimately access the goods and services in the areas that you're in, I mean, that's the end game here that we've got to all strive for. It's reducing congestion, it's providing alternatives, it's extending mobility and accessibility for those that lack options. And I think that's where an area like Atlanta, you know, is going to have the biggest impact in a lot of these kind of arterial areas around the city that can ultimately, you know, help solve the bigger problem of I-75 and 85 and 400.
Well, and just outsider's viewpoint, it seems like for a lot of people, it's going to have to be a change of mindset. It's going to, because for a lot of people, hey, I've got my car, so I've got control. And it's going to be tough to shift people's thinking, hey, take control by engaging in this different way of being transported.
Yeah, you know, and it's funny, probably one of the most active use cases that we have of all the routes that we've serviced across 9 states now. We just launched a project this week in Honolulu Airport. But of all the use cases we've served, one of the kind of most popular ones is a residential area that accesses a town center where people go and have dinner, maybe some wine. But it's funny how that is such a high volume route because people are doing a responsible thing. Hey, I can leave my car at home. Right. I can jump on this shuttle. I can go to dinner with my family and have a nice, you know, nice evening without having to jump behind the wheel of a car. And so it's those little steps, I think, that are going to lead to the bigger impact.
Little steps, big impact. We love it, and I love that we got a chance to meet today. So thank you very much to our guest today.
My pleasure.
Joe Moy from Beep, the CEO there, and a Jacksonville native, we're calling her. New episodes drop every Thursday at 9 a.m. We thank you for joining us for This Week in Jacksonville Business Edition.